It hurts. I cannot stand. The words left Elowen Fairborn's lips as barely a whisper, swallowed by the silence of the Deadlands. She lay curled on her side in the gray dust between two fallen pines, her body trembling so violently that her teeth cracked against each other with every spasm. Her fingers clawed at the frozen earth, nails splitting against stone, searching for something to hold onto while everything inside her came apart. The mate bond, or what remained of it, burned through her chest like a living flame. Each pulse sent white-hot agony radiating down her spine, through her ribs, into the marrow of her bones. She had heard stories about what rejection felt like. The elders in her pack used to whisper about it the way humans whispered about plagues. But no story, no warning, no whispered tale around a fire had prepared her for this. It was not the clean snap of a thread being cut. It was a slow, savage tearing, as though something with claws was reaching into her chest and pulling her wolf apart strand by strand. Her wolf, Nyx, had stopped howling 20 minutes ago. That terrified Elowen more than the pain. Since the day she presented as an Omega at 13, Nyx had been a constant presence in her mind, warm and fierce and stubbornly alive. Now there was only silence where her wolf should have been, a growing emptiness that felt like a room after someone had died in it. Elowen pressed her face into the dirt and tried to breathe. The air in the Deadlands tasted like ash and copper, the bitter residue of territory that belonged to no pack, land so stripped of life that even the trees had given up. No wolves hunted here, no patrols crossed this barren ground between the mountain territories. That was the point. That was why Aldrich had chosen this place. Blood had dried along her collarbone where his claws had caught her skin during the rejection ceremony. Not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to mark the severing. She could still feel the phantom pressure of his hand on her throat, holding her still while he spoke the words that dissolved their bond like acid poured on living tissue. Her body was shutting down. She could feel it happening in stages, the cold creeping inward from her fingers and toes, her heartbeat slowing, her vision narrowing to a gray tunnel. Without a pack bond to anchor her, without her mate bond to sustain her, an Omega's body simply stopped fighting. It curled inward like a wounded animal and waited for the end. Elowen closed her eyes. She had tried to do the right thing. She had tried to save them, the stolen Omegas, the shattered families, the wolves who had disappeared into the dark and never come home. And this was where righteousness had brought her. Face down in the dirt of a place called the Deadlands, dying alone because a man she had trusted decided she was easier to discard than to silence. A sound reached her through the fog of pain. Distant, low, the rhythmic crunch of paws on frozen ground. More than one set. Moving fast, her heart stuttered. Rogues. The Deadlands were riddled with them, wolves cast out of their packs, feral and desperate and drawn to the scent of vulnerable prey. An unbonded Omega bleeding in open territory was a death sentence wrapped in an invitation. Elowen tried to move, tried to push herself up. Her arms buckled. Her face hit the dirt again. The paw steps grew louder, closer, heavy and deliberate. Not the scattered scramble of rogues, something organized, something controlled. Please, she thought, please, not like this. The footsteps stopped. 3 days ago, Elowen Fairborn had believed she was about to become the luckiest Omega in the Northern Territories. The mating ceremony with Aldrich Thorne was supposed to happen at moonrise. Everything had been arranged for months, the alliance between her small Fairborn pack and the powerful Greymarch pack sealed with her hand and her bond. Her parents had wept with relief when the offer came. The Fairborns were a minor pack, barely 40 wolves clinging to a strip of forest at the edge of Greymarch territory. An alliance with the Thorne family meant protection, resources, survival. All it cost was their eldest daughter. Elowen had not minded. Not truly. Aldrich was handsome in the way that powerful men often were. He smiled easily, spoke beautifully, and carried the confidence of an alpha who had never been told no. When he held her hand during their courtship, his grip was firm, possessive, and she had mistaken that possession for desire. She had moved into the Greymarch estate 3 weeks before the ceremony, as tradition required. She had been obedient, gracious, everything an Omega bride was supposed to be. And then she found the room. It happened by accident. She had been looking for the kitchens, taken a wrong corridor in the sprawling manor, and found a study lined with filing cabinets and shelves stacked with leather-bound ledgers. The first ledger she opened contained names, female names, dozens of them, organized by date, with notations beside each one: transferred, relocated, sold. The word hit her like a physical blow. She turned the page. Beside each entry, a number that she realized with dawning horror was a price. These were Omegas, wolves from small packs, allied packs, packs that trusted the Thorns with their daughters, and the Thorns were selling them, transferring them to rogue packs, to underground breeding operations, to alphas who paid for what they could not earn through legitimate bonds. Names she recognized jumped from the pages. Oriel Marsh, 17, from the Fenwick pack. Supposedly ran away 2 years ago. Sold, the ledger said, for 12,000. Transferred to Sector 9, Lyrael Voss, 15. The Alpha King's younger sister. Disappeared during a border dispute 5 years ago. The entire Northern Territory had searched for her. And here, in Aldrich's father's handwriting, the truth. Relocated. 30,000. Private buyer. Eastern Territory. She should have run. She should have stolen the ledger and fled into the night. Instead, she did the thing that righteous people do when confronted with evil. She believed that confronting it would change something. She found Aldrich that evening and told him everything. She told him she could not bond with him unless he agreed to stop it, to free the women, to make it right. Aldrich listened with his arms crossed. When she finished, he smiled. That same charming smile he had used when he proposed. "You are very brave," he said softly, "and incredibly stupid." The next morning, he announced the bonding ceremony would proceed at sunset rather than moonrise, a romantic gesture, he explained. Elowen had believed him because she wanted to believe that her words had mattered. Instead, when sunset came, Aldrich led her to the ceremonial clearing in front of the entire Greymarch pack and performed a public rejection. He placed his hand on her throat, extended his claws just enough to draw blood, and spoke the severance rites while 200 wolves watched in silence. Elowen felt the bond shatter inside her chest like glass breaking underwater, sharp and cold and everywhere at once. She screamed. The pain dropped her to her knees while her wolf howled and thrashed, and then went terrifyingly quiet. Aldrich looked down at her the way someone looks at a stain on an expensive carpet. "She is unstable," he told the gathered wolves. "She attempted to steal from my family. She fabricated lies about our pack. The bond was a mistake, and I am correcting it." No one questioned him. 2 enforcers lifted her by the arms and carried her to a waiting vehicle. She was driven for hours, barely conscious, and dumped in the Deadlands just before dark. "If she survives, she will be too broken to talk," she heard one of the enforcers say, "and if she does not survive, that is one less problem." To the outside world, the cover story was already in place. The Omega bride had suffered a mental collapse before the ceremony. She had been returned to her family in disgrace. The Fairborns, too small and too dependent on Greymarch mercy to argue, would accept whatever version of events they were told. And the stolen Omegas, the ones in the ledger, the ones with prices beside their names, would remain lost. Unless Elowen survived. The wolves materialized from the tree line like shadows pulling free from the dark. 4 of them in shifted form, massive and battle-scarred, moving in a tight diamond formation that spoke of military discipline. Behind them, A fifth figure walked upright in human form, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in black from throat to boot. He moved with the kind of fluid control that only came from decades of absolute authority. Elowen could not lift her head. She saw them only as shapes through the blur of tears and pain. Her wolf stirred faintly, the first sign of life from Nyx in nearly an hour, and what Elowen felt from her was not fear. It was recognition. The man raised a fist. The wolves stopped instantly. He moved forward alone. When he knelt beside her, she smelled cedar and iron and something electric, something that made the shattered remnants of her bond ache in a way that was entirely different from pain. "She is alive," he said. His voice was deep, controlled. He was not speaking to her. Barely. "How long has she been here?" A hand touched her face, tilting it toward the fading light. She saw his eyes then. Pale gold, almost amber, with vertical pupils that marked him as something more than a standard alpha. "Rejection," he said flatly. "Recent. Within the last day. Her wolf is fading. She has hours, maybe less." He shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her, then gathered her against his chest. Elowen gasped. The moment his skin made contact with hers, something jolted through her, a pulse of warmth that pushed back against the cold, consuming her from within. Her wolf stirred again, stronger this time, pressing toward the surface with desperate urgency. "Her wolf is responding," the man murmured. He stood, lifting her as though she weighed nothing. "We make for Ironmere, full pace, no stops." "My lord." One of the wolves shifted to human form, a scarred male with wary eyes. "She carries the Greymarch scent. If we bring her into our territory, the Thorns will claim it is an act of aggression." "Let them claim whatever they wish. Kaelin. She was the Thorn Bride. If she is here, rejected and left to die, that is a Greymarch matter. Pack law says we do not interfere." The man called Kaelin looked down at Elowen's face. Something cold and furious shifted behind those amber eyes. "She is an Omega dying in my arms," he said. "Pack law can burn." He held her closer, and the warmth that radiated from his body reached deeper, pressing against the ragged edges of her shattered bond, like a hand held over a wound. Her wolf surged toward it with a keening, desperate sound that existed only in her mind. "Stay conscious," he ordered, moving toward the tree line at a pace that forced his wolves to scramble into formation. "I did not find you just to watch you die in transit." "Who?" Elowen managed, the words scraping out of her throat like broken glass. "Who are you?" "Kaelin Voss, Alpha King of the Northern Territories." Alpha King. The man whose sister had vanished 5 years ago, whose name Aldrich spoke like a curse at every meal, whose hatred for the Thorn family was the worst-kept secret in the Northern Territories. She had been found by her destroyer's greatest enemy. Elowen did not know if that made her the luckiest wolf alive, or the most doomed. But as Kaelin's arms tightened around her, carrying her away from the place she was meant to die, she felt something she had no right to feel. Hope. And hope, for an Omega with a death sentence in her chest, was the most dangerous thing of all. Elowen woke to the scent of pine smoke and the low crackle of a fire she did not build. The room was unfamiliar. Vaulted stone ceiling, narrow windows cut deep into walls old enough to remember wars. A bed beneath her softer than anything she had ever known. 41 hours. Kaelin Voss sat in a leather chair in the far corner, a stack of documents balanced on his knee. He did not look up. "That is how long you have been unconscious. Our healers stabilized your wolf, but the damage from the rejection is extensive. Full recovery will take weeks." "Where am I?" "Ironmere Citadel, the seat of the Northern Territories. My home." He set the documents aside. "You are safe here. No one enters Ironmere without my knowledge." That sounds less like safety and more like a cage. Not quite a smile crossed his face. "An honest Omega. Rare." He poured her water, helped her drink, and then pulled his chair closer with the focused intensity of someone about to negotiate terms for a war. Tell me why Aldrich Thorne rejected you and left you in the Deadlands to die. She told him everything: the ledgers, the names, the prices. The Omegas bought and sold like livestock. When she finished, the room was silent except for the fire. You said there were names in the ledger, he said. His voice was quieter than before, which somehow made it more dangerous. Do you remember them? Every single one. I have the kind of memory that does not let go of things. Numbers, dates, names. It is why Aldrich wanted me dead. One of the names in that ledger, he said slowly. Lyrael Voss, 15 years old, my sister. The air between them went still. I saw her entry, Elowen whispered. Relocated. 30,000. Private buyer. Eastern Territory. Kalen closed his eyes, just for a moment. When he opened them again, every trace of softness was gone. I have spent 5 years searching for her. 5 years of dead ends and political walls the Thorns built to keep me from the truth. He held her gaze. You have information that could expose the entire network, free those Omegas, and bury the Thorns completely. But I have no proof, my word against theirs. A rejected Omega accusing one of the most powerful families in the territories. Who would believe me? I would. And if I stand behind your claims, others will follow. Which brings me to my proposition. He stood. Bond with me. The words hit her like a physical force. You are out of your mind. I am entirely rational. You are a rejected Omega with no protection. The moment the Thorns learn you survived, they will send wolves to finish what they started. But as my bonded mate, you become untouchable. The Alpha King's Omega. You would have the protection of Ironmere, the authority of the crown, and a platform to testify that no one could dismiss. And in return, you help me dismantle the Thorns. Every name, every transaction. We build a case so comprehensive that when we bring it before the Pack Council, there is nowhere for them to hide. And we find my sister. This is not a mating. This is a military alliance. Yes, you will have your own chambers. In private, we are partners with a shared enemy. Nothing more. And if I refuse, then I will pay for your recovery and wish you well. But Aldrich believes you are dead. The moment you surface anywhere without protection, that changes. And he will not make the same mistake twice. Elowen thought of the names in the ledger. The girls sold. She thought of Lyrael Voss, 15 years old, reduced to a line item. She thought of her own sister, Thalina, 12 years old, still living under Greymarch's shadow. If I do this, she said, I want your word this is about justice, not just revenge. Every Omega in that ledger, we find them. We bring them home. Kalen extended his hand. Every single one. And my family, my parents, my sister. They need to be moved somewhere safe before the Thorns realize I am alive. Arrangements will begin immediately. She took his hand. His grip was warm, steady, and impossibly strong. Then we have an agreement. Rest tonight. When you are strong enough to walk, I will show you Ironmere. We have work to do. Kalen. He paused at the door. Why were you in the Deadlands? Something raw surfaced behind his eyes before he locked it down. I received intelligence that rogue activity had increased near the Greymarch border. I wanted to see it for myself. He opened the door. I was not looking for you, Elowen, but I am not sorry I found you. Then he was gone, and Elowen was alone with the fire and the weight of a choice that would either resurrect her or finish what Aldrich had started. Ironmere Citadel was not a home. It was a fortress carved into the face of a mountain, all black stone and iron gates, with towers that pierced the cloud line. The Voss family had held it for 6 centuries. Elowen learned the layout in pieces, each day pushing further from her chambers as her body healed, and Nyx slowly clawed her way back to consciousness. Still damaged, still quieter than she should have been. But there, a flickering ember where a bonfire had once burned. On her third day, Kaelin assigned her a guide. Miravel Oaks was the Citadel's head of household, a beta female in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a braid tight enough to double as a weapon. She had served 3 generations of Voss Alphas and carried herself with the rigid efficiency of someone who considered wasted time a personal insult. The Alpha King does not make impulsive decisions, Miravel told her on their first walk through the grounds. If he brought you here, he has calculated every outcome and determined that you are worth the risk. Do not make him regret that calculation. That is encouraging, Elowen said. It is not meant to be encouraging. It is meant to be honest. You have approximately 5 weeks before the Sovereignty Gathering. 5 weeks to learn how to stand like a queen, speak like a diplomat, and fight like you belong at the side of the Alpha King. The training was relentless. Pack protocols, diplomatic language, territorial law. The intricate hierarchy of the Northern Territories and who controlled what. She learned how to read a room full of alphas without flinching, how to project authority through posture alone, how to let silence do the work that words could not. A combat instructor named Brennick, a massive alpha with patience that did not match his size, taught her self-defense. You will never overpower an alpha, he told her bluntly, but you can outthink one. And if you outthink them fast enough, you do not need to overpower them. Kaelin was present but distant during those early weeks. They dined together each evening at opposite ends of a table built for 20, the distance between them as deliberate as everything else he did. He asked precise questions about her progress, reviewed what the tutors had covered, and spent the remaining time extracting information from her memory. The 7th entry in the second ledger, he would say, and Elowen would close her eyes and recite numbers, names, and dates. Kaelin would cross-reference against his own intelligence, building a map of the Thorn trafficking network that grew more detailed with each session. 3 weeks in, he told her about Lyrael. She was 15, fierce, reckless. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. She was visiting a neutral territory for a diplomatic function, standard security escort. The escort was ambushed. 2 of my wolves were killed. The rest were drugged. When they woke, Lyrael was gone. Because the Thorns sold her. My sister. Sold for 30,000, like livestock. He turned from the fire to face Elowen. I swore I would find her. 5 years, and I have failed every single day. You have not failed. You did not have what you needed. Now you do. You carry these memories like weapons. Does it not haunt you? Every night. But ghosts make excellent motivation. Something shifted in his expression, as though a wall he had built between them had developed its first crack. There is something else, he said. Your wolf responding to my presence in the Deadlands, the rejection sickness stabilizing when I held you. That should not have been possible. A rejected Omega's wolf does not respond to a stranger's touch. Not unless there is a deeper resonance between them. What does that mean? It means whatever bond we form publicly may have a foundation neither of us planned for. He stood. I will tell you more when I understand it myself. He left her with that, and Elowen spent the night feeling the faint, inexplicable pull toward a man who had offered strategy and might have accidentally offered something far more complicated. 4 weeks in, Kaelin hosted a territorial council dinner. 6 pack leaders from allied territories. It was supposed to happen later, but intelligence changed the timeline. Lady Grantham of the Ashvale Pack demanded an audit of her alliance contributions to the Thorns. Kaelin told Elowen that morning. Her accountants found discrepancies, the same patterns you described. And you need me to be the crack in their foundation. I need you to be the Omega who makes them question everything. Can you do this? I can do this. The dinner was held in Ironmere's Great Hall. Elowen descended the staircase on Kaelin's arm wearing deep sapphire silk that carried the same shade as the Voss family crest. A silver circlet sat in her dark hair. Steady, Kaelin murmured. You survived the Deadlands. A dinner party should not terrify you. The Deadlands did not judge my table manners. Something that might have been a laugh escaped him. Almost. When Lady Grantham mentioned the audit, Elowen seized the opening. She asked the right questions, offered careful observations about the Thorn financial structures, and suggested a full forensic audit without making a single direct accusation. The ripple moved through the table like a stone dropped in still water. After the guests departed, Kaelin found her in the corridor, leaning against the wall with her composure finally cracking. You were remarkable, he said. I was terrified. Those are not mutually exclusive. Lady Grantham will launch the full audit by week's end. You planted the first crack tonight. Careful, she said quietly. That almost sounded like a compliment. It was an assessment. They stood there in the corridor, the distance between them shrinking by fractions neither acknowledged, until Miravel's footsteps echoed from around the corner, and they stepped apart like wolves caught in firelight. The alliance had held its first test, and the bond between them, the one that was supposed to be purely strategic, had begun to shift into something neither could name. The Sovereignty Gathering was held once a year at Valenholt, the ancient neutral grounds where pack leaders convene to settle disputes, forge alliances, and remind each other that civilization was a choice they could revoke at any moment. 200 wolves from every major pack descended on the stone amphitheater built into the mountainside, filling the air with competing scents and barely concealed hostility. Elowen stood at the edge of the gathering field, Kaelin beside her, and felt every eye in the amphitheater turn toward them like predators tracking movement. Word had traveled fast. The Alpha King had taken a mate, not a political match from a powerful bloodline, an Omega, a nobody from the Fairborn pack. The whispers started immediately. That is the Thorn reject? She does not look broken to me. The Alpha King bonded her? There must be a reason. Elowen kept her spine straight. She wore black and silver, the Voss colors, with the Alpha Queen's circlet gleaming against her dark hair. Her wolf pressed against the surface with a low, steady growl. I am here, Nyx whispered. I am not leaving. And then she saw him. Aldrich Thorn stood near the central fire pit, surrounded by Greymarch wolves. His parents flanked him, Lord Viken and Lady Sephara Thorn. He had not seen her yet. His attention was on a young female wolf at his side, another Omega, petite and pale and looking at him with the same trusting adoration Elowen recognized from her own reflection 6 weeks ago. He was already grooming the next one. Then Aldrich's gaze found Kaelin, followed his arm, and landed on Elowen. The color drained from his face like water from a cracked vessel. His smile vanished. His body went rigid. One by one, the Greymarch wolves turned to look. Elowen held his gaze and did not blink. Lord Viken approached first, composure intact where his sons had fractured. Alpha King, we were delighted to hear of your bonding, though I did not expect your mate to be someone so familiar to our family. Familiar? Kaelin's voice carried just enough to draw nearby ears. In what way? Miss Fairborn was briefly engaged to my son. She departed before the ceremony under difficult circumstances. Difficult. Kaelin repeated the word like he was examining something rotten. I imagine being publicly rejected and left in the Deadlands to die qualifies as difficult. The wolves within earshot went silent. That evening, Elowen found a moment alone on the terrace overlooking the mountain valley. The air was cold and clean, and she needed both. Footsteps behind her. She knew who it was before he spoke. You are supposed to be dead. Elowen turned. Aldrich stood in the doorway, his charm stripped away, replaced by something darker. And yet, here I am. How? He stepped closer. My wolves left you in the Deadlands, with a severed bond and a dying wolf. You should not have survived the night. Someone found me. Someone who actually cared whether I lived. Voss. Aldrich's lip curled. You went running to my family's enemy. I did not run anywhere. I was lying in the dirt, unable to move. He carried me out. Unlike you, he chose to save me rather than leave me to die. What did you tell him? Everything. The word landed like a blade. Aldrich's jaw clenched. You are bluffing. If you had told him about the ledgers, he would have moved against my family already. Or perhaps he is building something you cannot escape, something so thorough that when it falls, it buries all of you. Kaelin materialized at her shoulder, silent as a shadow. This conversation is over. Walk away, Thorn. If you speak to her again without my presence, I will consider it a formal challenge. Aldrich held his ground for 3 seconds. Then he turned and stalked back inside. Kaelin's hands found her arms, steadying her. Are you all right? I did not flinch. I looked him in the eye, and I did not flinch. No, you did not. His thumbs traced circles on her arms, a gesture that seemed to happen without his permission. He is frightened now. That makes him unpredictable. Good. Let him be frightened. Let him feel what I felt. The next morning, Kaelin appeared in her doorway, dressed and armed. Get up. Something has happened. He handed her a folded parchment. Lady Saphara Thorn's handwriting. The Alpha Queen's younger sister. 12 years old. Unmated. Unprotected. Her parents accepted the relocation to Ironmere, but the girl was visiting a cousin in the Outer Territories when the escort arrived. She remains accessible. If the Alpha Queen continues to spread lies, remind her that wolves younger than her have disappeared before. Subtlety is preferred. An accident. Alawen's hands shook, not with fear, with rage so complete that her wolf surged to the surface and her eyes flashed gold. Thelina. They are threatening my sister. They were threatening her. I have wolves moving to intercept her now. She and your cousin will be at Ironmere within 2 days. They threatened a child, a 12-year-old. Because they are desperate, and desperate wolves attack whatever is closest to the throat. The gathering convenes its formal tribunal tomorrow. That is our moment. The case is not complete. We have Lady Grantham's audit, my testimony, your intelligence, and now a written threat against a child in Lady Saphara's own handwriting. She held up the letter. This is enough. Not for a conviction, but for a reckoning. Kaelin studied her for a long moment. She watched the strategist in him war with something less calculated, something that burned behind his eyes whenever he looked at her now. If we move tomorrow and fail, we lose everything. The Thorns will regroup. The council will dismiss us. If we wait, another Omega disappears. Another family is shattered. Another child is threatened. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of his body. You told me I was a weapon. Let me strike. His hand rose to her face, cupping her jaw with a gentleness that contradicted every hard edge of his reputation. You are more than a weapon, he said quietly. You have been since the night I found you. He kissed her. Not the formal press of lips from their bonding ceremony. This was real, his mouth against hers with an urgency that tasted like confession, both of them falling into something they had agreed was not supposed to happen. When they broke apart, Kaelin pressed his forehead against hers. Tomorrow, we bring everything. Together. Viken Thorn struck first. Before the tribunal convened, he requested a formal audience with the Council of Elders, the 5 oldest pack leaders who arbitrated disputes at the Sovereignty Gathering. By the time Alowen and Kaelin arrived at the amphitheater, Viken was already speaking, his voice resonant with practiced grief. The woman calling herself Alpha Queen is an imposter, he said, his voice resonant with practiced grief. She was engaged to my son under false pretenses. She stole confidential financial records. When confronted, she suffered a psychological break. My son released her from the engagement out of compassion. She then appeared weeks later bonded to the Alpha King, our family's most vocal political opponent, armed with stolen information. He faced the amphitheater. I submit that this bonding is a fraud. Every accusation she has made is built on theft, delusion, and the Alpha King's vendetta against the Thorn bloodline. Magistrate Orville, the eldest council member, turned to Kaelin. Alpha King Voss, you will have the opportunity to respond, but if you cannot substantiate your counterclaims with evidence, this council will rule in Lord Thorn's favor. The consequences for false accusation are severe. Win, or be destroyed. That night they assembled every fragment of evidence, audit results, intelligence reports, reconstructed ledger entries, Saphara's letter. What if it is not enough? Elowen asked. It will not need to be enough alone, Kaelin said. I have someone. A former handler inside the Thorn operation. She escaped 3 years ago. I have kept her hidden, waiting for this moment. You never told me. I tell no one. That is how she has stayed alive. The tribunal convened at noon beneath a sky the color of iron. 200 wolves filled the amphitheater. The 5 council elders sat in elevated seats. The Thorns stood to the right, Kaelin and Elowen to the left. Behind them, in the shadows, a cloaked figure waited. Kaelin stepped forward. Lord Thorn has painted a compelling picture. Let us examine the truth. He produced documents. These are independent audit results from Lady Grantham of the Ashvale Pack. 15 years of contributions to the Thorn Territorial Fund, returns inflated by 32%, underlying assets that do not exist. Clerical errors? Viken said. One error is clerical. 43 discrepancies across 12 pack accounts suggest a pattern. I have similar findings from Lord Harkin and Lady Morith. Whispers erupted. Financial irregularities do not address Lord Thorn's allegations against the Alpha Queen, Magistrate Orville said. No. For that, I yield to my mate. Elowen stepped forward, her wolf pressed against her skin, fierce and present. I found records of Omegas being sold, transferred, given prices like they were property. Wolves from packs represented in this amphitheater today. Daughters, sisters, mates, sold to rogue operations and private buyers across the Eastern Territories. The amphitheater went deathly still. I confronted Aldrich Thorn. I told him I could not bond with him unless he stopped it. I asked him to make it right. Instead, he staged a public rejection to destroy my credibility, then had his enforcers drive me to the Deadlands and leave me there to die. Her voice did not waver. I survived because the Alpha King found me. I am standing here today because one wolf chose to save my life, while another chose to end it. Lies, Aldrich burst out. She is delusional. She fabricated everything. Then explain this. Kaelin held up the intercepted letter. He read it aloud, every word carrying across the amphitheater. The threat against a 12-year-old girl. The casual discussion of making a child disappear. By the time he finished, Lady Saphara's face was the color of ash. That is a forgery, Viken said, but his voice had lost its polish. Scent does not forge, Lord Thorn. Magistrate Orville had the letter verified. The scent is genuine. The amphitheater erupted. Where are these stolen Omegas? Viken pressed. I can tell you exactly where they were sent, Elowen said. She began to recite. Oriel Marsh, Fenwick Pack, 17, 12,000, Sector 9, Daria Ashwood, Caledon Pack, 16, 15,000, Eastern Range, Marith Hale, Thornberry Pack, 19. Stop. A gray-haired alpha female rose from the crowd, tears streaming. Marith Hale is my daughter. She disappeared 4 years ago. You are telling me she was sold? Yes. For 8,000. The amphitheater erupted again, grief and fury mixing. Another wolf stood. Then another. Families recognizing names. And if testimony is required, Kaelin said, I have one more witness. The cloaked figure stepped forward. She was young, mid-20s, with a scar from ear to collarbone. My name is Jessamy Crow. For 2 years, I worked as a handler in the Thorn trafficking network. I transported 14 Omegas. I was recruited by Aldrich Thorne personally. She pulled aside her cloak, revealing scars across her arms. When I tried to leave, his enforcers nearly killed me. I escaped 3 years ago. I have been waiting for this moment. This is theater, Aldrich hissed. Then explain the scars. Explain why 14 Omegas I transported have never been seen again. Silence. Absolute devastating silence. Magistrate Orville rose. Lord Vykin Thorne, Lady Sephara Thorne, Lord Aldrich Thorne. This council finds sufficient evidence to warrant immediate investigation into financial fraud, Omega trafficking, attempted murder, and conspiracy. You are stripped of territorial authority pending trial. Your assets are frozen. You cannot do this, Vykin roared. You have held nothing. You have stolen. Orville's voice was ice. Enforcers, escort the Thorne family from these grounds. As guards surrounded the Thornes, Aldrich's eyes found Alawen. This is not over, he said. Yes, Alawen replied. It is. The Thornes were led away, and the amphitheater erupted in something Alawen had never expected to hear directed at her. Applause. 200 wolves acknowledging that an Omega they had dismissed as broken had just shattered the most powerful lie in the Northern Territories. Kaelin's arms circled her waist. You did it. We did it. They did not speak again until they were alone. The door closed against the world. When did this stop being strategy? She asked. Kaelin knelt in front of her, took her hands. The night you told me ghosts make excellent motivation. I realized you were not a tool. You were a person I was starting to need. And that terrified me more than anything the Thornes could do. You are the Alpha King. You are not supposed to be terrified. I am a wolf who found a dying Omega in the Deadlands and lost control of every plan because she refused to be anything less than extraordinary. He pressed her hands to his chest. I did not plan for you, Alawen. But somewhere between the strategy and the war, you became the thing I was actually fighting for. I do not want to be your queen because it is strategic. I want to be your queen because you chose me. I choose you. Every morning. Every night when I cannot sleep because I am terrified something will take you from me. His voice cracked. You are not a weapon. You are the reason the weapon matters. I love you, she whispered. I did not plan to, but I do. I have known since you looked Aldrich in the eye and did not flinch. I loved you for your courage before I loved you for anything else. They held each other while outside. The Northern Territories reshaped themselves around the truth they had spoken together. 4 months later, the first Omegas came home. Oriel Marsh was found in Sector 9, malnourished but alive. Daria Ashwood was recovered from the Eastern Range. The rescue operations moved systematically through every location Alawen had memorized. 18 Omegas were recovered in the first 2 waves, 5 more in the months that followed. And on a cold morning in late autumn, a young woman with amber eyes and the unmistakable Voss jaw walked through the gates of Ironmere Citadel. Lyrael Voss, 20 years old, 5 years missing, scarred and wary and very much alive. Kaelin did not speak when he saw her. He crossed the courtyard in 3 strides, dropped to his knees, and held his sister, while his body shook with the first tears Alawen had ever seen him shed. Alawen watched from the doorway, her hand on her stomach where the first faint flutter of new life had begun to make itself known. Vykin Thorne was sentenced to life imprisonment. Lady Sephara received 20 years. Aldrich, captured fleeing to the Eastern Territories, would never see freedom again. The testimony of 23 recovered Omegas ensured it. Alawen established the Ironmere Sanctuary, a refuge for recovered Omegas offering healing, education, and the one thing every stolen Omega had been denied: choice. Within its first season, it housed 30 wolves. Kaelin funded it without hesitation and defended it without reservation. The healers finally had their answer about the wolf resonance. What Kaelin and Eloin shared was not simply a strategic bond. It was a true mate bond, one that had existed in potential long before they ever met. Nyx had recognized Kaelin's wolf in the Deadlands because the connection was already there, dormant, waiting. The rejection from Aldrich had not destroyed Eloin's capacity for bonding. It had cleared the way for the bond she was always meant to have. The universe has a cruel sense of timing, Kaelin said when the healers delivered their findings. Or a perfect one, Eloin replied. If Aldrich had not rejected me, I would never have found you. Besides you, Kaelin said one evening, watching her review sanctuary applications at her desk, and whatever our child decides to become, this is the most important thing Ironmere has ever produced. She looked up. How long have you known? Your scent changed 2 weeks ago. I was waiting for you to tell me. Every moment with you is the right moment, he said, pressing his lips to her forehead. I found you dying in the Deadlands. Now you are building a world where no Omega dies alone. On the anniversary of the night he found her, Eloin stood on the ramparts of Ironmere, watching snow fall over the mountains. Kaelin stood beside her, his coat draped over her shoulders. Do you ever think about that night? She asked. Every day. What if I had taken a different route? What if I had arrived 10 minutes later? But you did not. No. I picked up a dying Omega who smelled like courage, and she dismantled the most dangerous family in the Northern Territories, while teaching me that strategy without something real to fight for is worthless. He pulled her closer. They threw you away, but I found you, and you turned that pain into a sanctuary, a legacy, a life. They called me broken, she said softly, damaged, a reject. And now they call you queen. Not because of me, because you chose to stand when everything told you to stay down. Because you remembered every name and refused to let them be forgotten. I had help. You had a stubborn alpha who got lucky on a dark road. You are more than that. I know. You made me more. They stood together as the snow fell, two wolves who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and built the best possible life from the wreckage. Proof that the coldest nights do not have to be the end of the story. Sometimes they are just the beginning. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story touched something in you, the fight for justice, the refusal to stay broken, the power of being chosen when the world throws you away, I hope you will share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you are listening from. If you are ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You are the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even the coldest moments can lead to the warmest beginnings.